right, folks, it's time for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Take it away, guys.
Hello and welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and
Mecky. Hang on, lots of echo, but...
Yeah, I know. How's that?
That's better.
Alrighty, so welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mecky. We are coming to you live from the Freedom Slips studios in Sydney, Australia. As one piece of the information super puzzle on Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, you can talk to us in the chat room while we're on the air right now. Not if you get us on YouTube, of course, but if you're listening to us right now, you can get into the chat room. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook to get updates between shows, and check out ShinySideOut.net for our show archives, show notes, and links that we paste into the show into the chat during the show. They're part of our show notes as well. Get one of these apps for your smart device: Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, and TuneIn.com. You can also purchase a Grace tabletop radio. Or, what we'd really like you to do is to go to www.freedomslips.com and jump into the chat. It's a nice full house I can see today, which is great. And if you're in the States, the number you can call us on is 347-688-2902. Again, 347-688-2902. Okay. Dave, this is show number 70. How are we doing?
We're doing pretty good. Hey, I'd just like to say a big shout out to Solaris, who, once again, we follow her, or she warms up the crowd for us. I think she has a great show. I listen to it every week now, and I'm just loving it.
Dave.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good man.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just very faintly, my friend. Are we being interfered with again?
I do hope not.
You were gone there for 2 seconds. I don't know how much of the intro I got through.
I think you did get the intro through. Is my volume okay?
You're a little bit low, my friend.
Okay, I'm working on that as we speak. How are we going with that now?
That's a little bit better.
Is it better now?
It's a little bit tinier.
Oh, wireless. I got a wireless. How's that? Is that better?
Not a lot. It's okay.
Okay, well, it's going to have to do for now.
Yeah. Look,
sorry, everybody.
Yeah, look, I'm sure the little men in their little black hats and little black sunglasses and little black suits are laughing at us, which is fine. And maybe they're doing it because today we're going to talk about false flags. But before we do that, Dave, how has your week been?
My week's been pretty good. Loving it. No, I'm kidding. I had to go to work a couple of times during the night to fix hardware that shouldn't fail but did fail. Yeah, never mind. No, I won't mention any names or anything, but it was... Really, Mick? I can't believe it. I had some kids sitting at my table fiddling with my EQ.
Nice.
So that's the reason for the tinniness. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think I can do anything about it until... Hang on, does that make any... No, that hasn't made any difference. I don't know. We'll have to see anyway. So, yeah, how about you, Mac? What's going on?
Oh, look, just work. Really, to be honest with you, a few interesting things come out from the news, of course, but yeah, for me, it's just work and trying to do some research for the show, which hopefully is going to be interesting today. But yeah, no, it has been low key, Dave. Luckily, that's a good thing.
Well, unlike our government in this country,
isn't that funny?
I got an email from Kevin, and I'm not kidding. It was clearly his press machine emailing me anyway. But I got an email from him saying that he means to do well, and hopefully it's going to be a big change. I don't know in America if this happens very often, but I don't think there's even a position to be able to do it. But in this country, you can be voted in, and then your party can change, swap you in for somebody else.
Yeah, but see, the thing is this, we don't vote, and maybe we should explain this to our international listeners. In Australia, we've got a two-party system, just like the Westminster system in the UK, and you vote for the party. So you might be voting for the guy or the girl that is in charge of that party at that time. Doesn't mean you're going to have that person in charge for the entire term like we didn't. So Kevin Rudd was ousted. It was a bit of a coup 3 years ago. And Juliet Gillard came in. And the same thing happened just last week in reverse. And Kevin Rudd came back and ousted Juliet Gillard just before the election because her approval ratings were in the 20th percentile. So she was getting like 24, 25, 26% approval rating from the people, and her party thought, the caucus really, that
we can't run against the opposition with terrible approval like this.
Exactly right, mate. Funny though, I think.
Yeah. I'm gonna. I can't really do much. What I might do is Meki's got the show. I'm really struggling here, Meki. I'm getting comments saying that it sounds terrible. So.
Nah, you sound lovely. It's just the microphone.
Hey, I might swap to my other mic. Hang on a second.
Awesome.
Listen to this.
I'm listening, and while Dave is doing that, let me entertain you with some fun facts.
Hello. How is that?
Have you changed?
Yeah. Does it sound any different?
It sounds like you're in the room next door. Talking through a door.
No way, really?
Yeah, it's all good. And Greenheart, I see the demon creds and rebubbly tiles. It's maybe reptiles, right? No, look, it's beyond the joke for us in Australia, and I do hope that people will vote properly this time around. And Monkey8326, yes, I agree with you. Democracy is something we don't have. Most of us are actually, it's a republic. It's a representative republic. So we are voting for our representatives or our parties, which then vote on our behalf. Switzerland, to my knowledge, is the only democracy in the world that takes almost every important decision to the people and conducts a plebiscite. That's Switzerland.
That's what should happen everywhere.
Which is much better. Of course, then I guess having some reps deciding your fate. In the States, it's similar. In most other countries, it is all a representative republic. Okay, I need to turn up. I need to speak louder. I can do that. Okay, Dave, how are you doing now? You much?
Well, I am here. If anyone can... does it really sound that terrible, Meki? Earth to Meki.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Wow, there's something is going on, guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right, look, hey, did you want to cover off any news topics this week, my friend?
No. I reckon let's just go into it.
Let's go right into it. I'm with you. Okay, so we want to talk about false flags today with you guys, and the reason for that is recently some horrible things have happened in the United States. Specifically, there was the Boston bombing. I'm sure you remember that, and some odd photos that came out of that. And we're not going to talk about that specifically. We're going to talk about a few other false flags throughout history and in fairly recent history as well. But we will not discuss the most recent. I guess, well, they are attacks, and they are terrorist attacks. I don't care who commits them, if it's the government or terrorists or whoever. And I think it's too fresh to discuss this, so I don't want to open up any wounds. I do want to talk about Dave.
But just honestly, keep it in mind.
Yeah, keep it in mind. I do want to talk with Dave about some things that happened in the past, and I want to show a pattern, right? Dave and I want to show you guys a pattern of behavior that our leaders have had over, several thousand years, in fact, as we will show you. To blame someone else for their actions, and to in fact initiate actions that the majority is against, but with the aid of false flag maneuvers and operations, the majority was duped into supporting the action which previously they had not supported. But that'll become clearer as we go along. So what is a false flag? Now, a false flag, covert military or paramilitary operation is designed to deceive in such a way that the operations appear as though they are being carried out by other entities, groups, or nations than those who actually planned and executed them. Okay? Operations carried out during peacetime by civilian organizations, such as, as well as covert or government agencies, and maybe by extension they're called false flag operations if they seek to hide the real organization behind an operation. The name, which is interesting, false flag, has its origins in naval warfare, where the use of a flag other than the belligerent's true battle flag as a ruse de guerre, which is a war tactic or war trick, before engaging an enemy has long been acceptable. So you use someone else's flag before you attack to lull them into a sense of security, and when you're close, you just open fire with your cannons on a broadside, right? That's a fault. That's where the term comes from.
It comes from the naval.
Correct, sir.
Yep.
Such operations are also acceptable in certain circumstances in land warfare to deceive enemies in similar ways, providing that the deception is not perfidious, and all such deceptions are discarded before opening fire upon the enemy. Now, what does that mean? It means that you are actually declaring yourself prior to the actual engagement. So you might get close, and in fact, I guess what happened was that certain, I think, Allied troops had German uniforms, operated in the theater of war behind enemy lines, and Germans the same, wearing Allied uniforms, on spy missions and so forth. So, but if you do engage, and these are the international rules of war, if you do engage, you have to declare yourself to be the enemy, so we know who's shooting at whom. I don't know if that is still the case. Probably not. They've
not so much.
No, really, not so much, right? No, I'm with you, mate.
So did you say that it wasn't just a? That's where the word ruse came from, by the way.
Yep.
Also, it's not just a false flag, but it can be called a black. You said black flag.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Because sorry, I was having audio issues at the time.
No, that's all right, dude. Maybe,
I'm on deck now.
I didn't come through properly, but yeah, look, that's all correct. So it is essentially an operation which is operating under false pretenses, okay, and blaming someone other than the actual perpetrators. That's the key thing here.
Yeah, it is.
Of course, and this is really what the aim of the show is to show you guys a pattern of this kind of activity, behavior, whatever you want to call it, throughout history. Okay, this is not a new thing. It's in fact been acceptable for quite a long time now. Now, the most commonly known false flag operations consist of a government agency staging a terror attack, whereby an uninvolved entity gets blamed for the carnage. That's quite common, and we'll look at those. As at least 2,000 years have proven, false flag operations, with healthy doses of propaganda and ignorance, provide a great recipe for continuing warfare and an excuse for starting wars as well. Okay? There's a very interesting quote which I'm going to read out to you from the book War is a Racket, written by two-time Medal of Honor recipient Major General Smedley Butler. And this is what he said. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico and especially Tampico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National Citibank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China, in 1927, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Now, this is coming from a major general that was awarded the Medal of Honor twice, and I guess this book was his confessional. Or maybe it just got too much in the end. What do you think, Dave?
Completely.
Right. So it's really, and it's telling as well. And I guess at the end of his life, after 33 years, when he I guess finished his military career, and he may have maybe approaching death's door, he felt it necessary or incumbent upon himself to come clean. In fact, at that point, it probably wouldn't have mattered, because all of those things had happened, and the United States had been firmly entrenched. I shouldn't say United States. The business interests had been firmly entrenched in the nations that he helped make safe. So, I guess you could say that the American military, the American intelligence agencies, operate as an extended interest of big business, big banks, and the military-industrial complex in the United States, and in fact globally. I think that's a fair enough statement to make. What do you think, Dave?
Oh, thanks for keep throwing to me. Yes. I completely agree. And look, we can't say that it's only isolated to this time period. We know that the same things are going on, and I'm just going to tie it together real quick with the hoo-ha that's going on with our non-privacy. Now, we spoke about this last week, and it's obviously in the news, and anyone who is anybody that, well, as long as if you're just talking to someone next to you, someone can eavesdrop. And eavesdropping is going on around the world, and the business side of this, to make money, people are taking advantage of their ability to be able to eavesdrop for business reasons. Now, it doesn't just have to be the false flags, to get us there, or to manufacture your way in as a country, although that does seem to be what's going on today. But it comes from a governmental or a military position. So, Becky, what's this next piece?
Oh, look, so what we wanted to show you, like I said a number of times now, is a certain pattern that the greater powers, that rule us, if you will, have used in justifying the policies and justifying wars, in fact, in shifting blame from themselves to others. Mm-hmm. And it is through that blaming and false flagging that this is achieved. So the first one, well, it's not the first one. Let's call it the most significant in ancient history that is still being talked about quite a bit, is the Great Fire in Rome. On July 1964 AD, which is the year 64 of the Common Era, after the birth of Christ, a great fire destroyed the city of Rome, and they killed enormous amounts of people, and it burned uncontrolled for 5 days. And after that had happened, 4 of the 14 Roman districts were burned to the ground, and 7 more were severely damaged. And it was no secret at the time that Nero wanted to build a series of palaces, which he planned to name Neropolis. Now, Rome was a major metropolitan center, right? Hundreds of thousands of people lived there, and it was also apparently quite, dirty, and there were slums and the squalor, and Nero despised that. Now, the planned location, though, for his Neropolis, where he wanted to build those palaces, was in the city. And in order to do that, he had to... he would have had to tear down a third of Rome. 30% of Rome's buildings would have had to go. The Senate rejected the idea, which they had the power to do. And then, coincidentally, the fire cleared the very real estate that Nero required to build his city, or his improved and more beautiful city. Now, despite the obvious benefits, there's still a good probability that Nero did not start the fire. Okay. Accounts of the day say that when Nero heard about the fire, he rushed back from Antium, which is where he had a summer palace, I guess, to organize a relief effort using his own money. He opened his palaces to let in the homeless and had food supplies delivered to the survivors. Now, however, the problem is that the people knew about Nero's plans for Neropolis, and in all of his efforts to help the city could not counteract the rampant rumors that he had helped start the fire, or in fact lit the fires himself. So even though he obviously did try to help the city and help the people that had lost their home, and even tried to help put out the fire, that did not stop the people from trying to blame him for the fire itself. So Nero's administration realized the need to employ false flag 101. When anything bad happens to you, even if it's accidental, point the finger at your enemy. Now, who was the enemy at the time? And this is where it gets interesting. There was a new cult of religious nutters, apparently. Now, the cult was unpopular because its followers refused to worship the emperor, denounced possessions, held secret meetings, and they were always talking about the destruction of Rome and the end of the world. Even more lucky for Nero, 2 of the cult's biggest leaders, Peter and Paul, were currently in town. I guess you understand where I'm going with this. Nero spread word that the Christians had started the Great Fire.
Of course
the
they did.
citizens of Rome bought this lie, hook, line, and sinker, and hundreds, maybe even thousands, were fed to the lions or smeared with tar and set on fire to become human street lamps. Nice. Okay, so this was one of the first great purges against the Christian religion. And in fact, it was, it really had nothing to do with the Christian religion as such. They just happened to be the scapegoats for the great fire that destroyed a very large part of Rome. That theme continued through the ages, and in fact, not just the Christians that were blamed, Jews as well in following centuries, and then you had gypsies and so forth and so on. It is just a common theme to find a large minority of people, it has to be a large minority, and blame them for all the ills of the world. Okay?
That's almost oxymoronic, a large minority. But you're right. It's those people over there that did it.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
what that does, it creates common enemy for all of the rest of the people, who are then able to focus their energy on that, so that the people can slink away or achieve their objectives.
Yeah. Correct, sir. And, again, it is echoed through time. So the next incident that Dave and I picked up was the main incident. So the Spanish Empire was the fairly truly global empire, okay? And it reached its height of power in the late 1700s. Now, by 1898, Spain was losing territory quite significantly and on a regular basis. Cuba, which was a Spanish territory, was becoming very hard to control, and a minor revolution broke out. Now, this wasn't good news for the United States, who owned Cuban sugar, tobacco, and iron industry, and those interests were valued at over $50 million at the time. Today, that value is roughly $1.2 billion, so if you look at it in terms of today's money. The mainstream media, which existed then, we're talking like the early 19th century, the mainstream media dominated by newspaper magnates Joseph Pulitzer, yes, the prize was named after him, and William Randolph Hearst, exaggerated and outright fabricated stories of horrible conditions under Spanish rule. Following the age-old maxim, if it bleeds, it leads, the newspapers published stories about Spanish death camps, Spanish cannibalism, and inhumane torture. The newspapers sent reporters to Cuba. All right. However, when they got there, they found quite a different story. Artist and correspondent, one of the reporters that was sent by Hearst, Frederick Remington, wrote back to Hearst, "There is no war here. Request to be recalled." Hearst's famous reply, "Please remain. You furnish the pictures. I'll furnish the war." And he did. So what happened? Hearst's newspaper, continually screaming how Spanish Cuba was going to hell in a handbasket, convinced big business interests in the U.S. to put pressure on anti-war President William McKinley to protect their Cuban investments. McKinley, in response, sent the USS Maine battleship to Havana Harbor as a calming shore force. 3 weeks after arriving on the night of February 15, 1898, the USS Maine exploded and killed 266 men on board. Now, apparently there are two theories for that particular explosion. Some believe the explosion was caused by an external mine that detonated the ship's ammunition magazines. Others say it was caused by a spontaneous coal bunker fire that reached the ammunition magazines. Now, bear in mind that back then, I guess security procedures weren't quite as refined as they are today, and even today, these kinds of accidents happen. Now, currently, it appears the evidence seems to be in favor of the external mine theory. Irrelevant, though. Irrelevant. Without waiting for an investigation, America's mainstream media blamed the tragedy on Spain and beat the drums for war. By April of that very same year, McKinley yielded to public pressure and signed a congressional resolution declaring war on Spain, and thus began the Spanish-American War. To help pay for this war, Congress enacted a temporary tax of 3% on long-distance telephone bills. Bear with me, this is interesting. This was essentially a tax on the rich, as only about 1,300 Americans owned telephones in 1898. So that's 1,300 Americans. Although the Spanish-American War ended in 1898, the temporary tax was only abolished in 2005. Over its lifetime, the 170-year-old tax generated almost $94 billion. More than 230 times the cost of the Spanish-American War. Now, the Spanish-American War put a large nail in the coffin of Spain's global empire. And by the end of 1898, the United States, which was funded in opposition to imperialism, against the British and whatnot, found itself in control of not only Cuba, but of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Hawaiian Islands as well. Okay, so false flag here. Maybe not so much, I guess it is a false flag, but it wasn't a false flag perpetrated by the US government or the US military. It was perpetrated by the US mainstream media, Hearst and Pulitzer and so forth, in league with big business, because it was really the business interests that they were worried about, and this seemed like a perfect opportunity to grow their wealth by, I guess, kicking out the Spanish and extending their tentacles, as it were, into the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, and Hawaii, and of course, in the following years into Meso and South America as well. Interesting. Now, it's not all Americans, of course, that do this. It's like we said with the Romans. Even though I see the Roman Empire being continued within the American Empire. That's my own opinion, though, just entirely me. Now, the next point I want to discuss with you guys.
Wait. I just wanted to tell Nighthawk, by the way, Nighthawk, I know you're listening. I've changed my avatar photo. Thank you for those comments last night. I was having a bit of a party at my house, and I was unable to join the round table, and I apologize for that. I should have gotten together with all the other hosts. Unpause, Mickey.
No worries, absolutely. So by the way, that avatar looks pretty professional. With that microphone, I love it. It's like a bit of a screen there, right?
Yeah, it's a plosive filter or a pop filter.
Something I need, I think. The next thing we want to discuss with you guys is it's the Manchurian incident. Not the Manchurian
I like this one.
candidate. Sorry?
I like this one.
It's good, isn't it? All right, you take it.
No,
I take it. Okay, now, as we all know, there was a massive economic crisis in the 1920s, a global economic crisis, if you will. There was the Wall Street collapse and all that, and the slump that followed this 1929 crisis and the near obliteration of Wall Street hit Japan especially hard. Exports fell, unemployment rose. Now, Japan wasn't the economic powerhouse it is today for various reasons, which I can go into later. Now, Japan was not rich in natural resources. It needed oil and coal to make power, to run the machines, to produce the goods, to sell to other countries, to make money, to buy the food, to have enough energy, and, to the horse that lost the shoe, that lost the war. Now, Manchuria, a province of China, had its fair share of oil and coal. And if you look at the map, Manchuria is not that far from the Japanese island. After Japan decided that it needed to invade Manchuria, they needed a pretext to justify the invasion. That's also a common theme that we will encounter again. They chose to create a false flag attack on a railway close to Liaoqiao Lake, a big flat area that had no military value to either the Japanese or the Chinese. The main reason that particular spot was chosen was for its proximity, roughly 800 meters, to Chinese troops stationed at Beidaying. The Japanese press called the no-name site of the blast Liu Tiao Guo, which was Japanese for Liu Tiao Bridge. However, there was no bridge there, not even anywhere near it. But the name helped convince some of the people that the sabotage was a strategic Chinese attack. Colonel Itagaki Seishiro and Lieutenant Colonel Kanji Ishiwara ordered officers of the Shimamoto regiment to place a bomb beneath the tracks. That original bomb failed to detonate, and a replacement had to be found. It's almost like a comedy of errors. I'm sorry, I'm just imagining these bungling military types, placing bomb after bomb without any effect. Anyway, so a replacement had to be found. At 10:20 p.m. on September 18, 1931, the tracks were finally blown. Surprisingly, however, the explosion was minor, and only one side of the rail was damaged. And the damage was so light that a train headed for Shenyang passed by only a few minutes later. So the trains could still use the rail.
It was ineffectual.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it's really hilarious. I mean, it's just anyway. But it was good enough. It wasn't good enough excuse to invade anyway. The Japanese immediately charged the Chinese soldiers with the destruction of that particular rail track, and then invaded Manchuria. A puppet government known as Manchukuo was installed. The League of Nations investigated. Now, the League of Nations is the precursor to the United Nations. Famously suggested to be created by Woodrow Wilson, and then Woodrow Wilson didn't let the United States join, I guess. But anyway, so that's the League of Nations. They investigated, and in a 1932 report denied that the invasion was an act of defense, as Japan had advertised. But, I guess the fact-finding mission didn't really matter, because rather than vacating Manchuria, so leaving Manchuria, Japan decided to leave the League of Nations. In a similar fashion as Hitler and then later Stalin left the League of Nations, which inevitably led to World War II. But again, this is a false flag, an excuse for an action to take place by blaming someone else for an action that was committed by the people that wanted this action to happen. Right?
Remember, if any of these actions sound familiar, your brain is putting it together. These pieces are being put together by your brain, telling you, look around at the things that are going on or have gone on within your own living memory, and see if we can. And your brain's saying that, look, I found some similarities between these events.
Absolutely.
That's what happens with us. That's what's happening with you right now.
Yes, 100%. In fact, the next one is it'll probably feel very, 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 very familiar. Okay, in 1933, just a week before general elections, that might place enough Nazis in office to make Hitler de facto dictator, the Reichstag, which housed the parliament of the German Empire, was set on fire. And bear in mind, back then it was an empire. Adolf Hitler assured everyone that communist terrorists had started the fire. Hitler's party member, Hermann Göring, who was also the head of his SA, or Schutzabteilung, which means security department, if you will.
Secret, the high level.
Yeah. Well, no, these were guys these are ex-Wehrmacht guys that used to be the enforcers, if you will, the SA.
Not the SS, but the SA.
The SS later replaced the SA in the Night of the Long Knives. Anyway, Hermann
sorry.
Göring, who later became the head of the Luftwaffe as well, stated that he had secret evidence that would soon be made public, and that evidence would prove that the communists did it. Now, these proclamations by Hermann Göring came on top of weeks of Nazi-organized street violence designed to whip the public into a pathological fear of communists. The next day, the Nazis convinced the senile, which is unfortunately true, President von Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag's decree. The decree, using Defense Against Terrorism as an excuse, suspended just about every major civil liberty set forth in the Weimar Constitution.
Oh my goodness, doesn't that sound familiar?
Oh yeah, now these are the specific ones. Habeas corpus, which is the right to know why you're being put in jail. Gone. Mm-hmm. Freedom of opinion. Gone. Freedom of the press. Not anymore. Freedom to organize and assemble. No, you would get deported. Now, the Reichstag's decree even allowed the government to spy on its own citizens' personal mail and telephone conversations without a warrant.
Wow!
What? That would never happen today. Now, in fact, it was a precursor to President George W. Bush's secret order in 2002 ordering the National Security Agency to do exactly the same thing. Now, so what about the fire, right? The only thing historians seem to agree on is that Marinus van der Lubbe, a Dutch communist and mentally disturbed arsonist hungry for fame, was found inside the building. Despite the Nazi attempt to blame the fire on a group of communists, the communists were later acquitted by the Nazi government itself. After years of investigative research and extensive, fact-finding, most historians believe the Hitlerites, or the Hitler people, themselves set fire to the Reichstag, using van der Lubbe as their patsy. They knew a nut was going to try to burn down the building, and not only did they let him do it, but they may have befriended him, encouraged him, and even helped the blaze spread by scattering gasoline and incendiaries. Most Germans feeling safe from terrorism again, didn't mind that their freedom and liberty had been stolen, or that so much of their life and work had become so strictly controlled. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Anyone? No?
Yes. I was going to play cricket sound, but I don't want the audio recording to fail. Do you know what? That you're this is the thing. If you haven't been listening over the last 5 minutes, it's happened to you. It's happened to me and Mackie, even in Australia. Same thing.
Yep.
9/11, bingo. All our rights were dissolved. Does anyone listening to this station still believe 9/11 was a real attack by real terrorists?
Yeah.
You have to question that still. I don't have to question it. I'm on the side of it just being a government-controlled thing. But, make your own mind up with that. But still, they used whatever happened that day to justify removing all of our rights.
Oh, look, in fact, your rights are being eroded as we speak. Our rights, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But your rights in the US more specifically.
Because you had more than us.
Well, that's you did. and you still hang on to a few, and they're controversial and contentious. But I'll be honest with you, don't give up your right to bear arms, because what happens then is that only criminals will have arms, submachine guns, whatever it might be, because criminals will always have guns.
Mm-hmm.
It is the law-abiding citizen that will be disarmed, because it's only the law-abiding citizen that's going to give up his gun, okay, or her gun for that matter.
That's right.
Okay, for amnesties, it's important in the greater scheme of things to be able to hold your government accountable. Ideally through elections, but at some point in the future that may not be possible. So I'm not a gun nut, if you will. I'm not a gun lover. I can shoot. I have shot. I don't mind guns. I don't own any. But I understand the principle of it, and I certainly understand it in the United States, and I understand why it's in your Constitution. I get it, and it's one of the rights that you should not give up, because the people that wrote the Constitution did fight against oppression. They did overthrow, a dictatorial government from afar. Again, no taxation without representation. I'm all for that as well. So essentially, what I meant is that you need to be heard, and you need to be able to defend your freedoms at some point. The Germans and the Soviets, the Nazis, I should say, not the Germans, the Nazis. One of the first things that is to collect all guns from the people, take it all away, and take away your freedom of assembly, take away all of those freedoms, which have gone pretty much in the United States. There's no habeas corpus anymore. You can be held indefinitely by the U.S. government if you're not a U.S. citizen. And even if you are a citizen, they can hold you for days now, okay? And maybe even weeks. I don't know what the latest rulings are. But all of that, due process and the phone call and a right to defense and a right to face your accuser, they're all pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm.
But let us go on a bit more because it'll become clear that this is, again, a common theme.
So what do we got? We got...
We've got the start of World War II, my friend.
Yeah, awesome. Let's do this one.
Yeah, look, this is a very interesting one. This is probably one of the most famous ones. In the late evening of Thursday, August 31, 1939, German covert operatives pretending to be Polish terrorists seized the Gleiwitz radio station in the German-Polish border region of Silesia, which coincidentally my ancestors come from. We came from, or my grandmother and my grandfather came from Upper Silesia, which is now in fact in Poland, and no longer Germany. The station's music program came to an abrupt halt, followed by frantic German voices announcing that Polish formations were marching toward town. Germany was being invaded by Poland, if you can believe it. Then, like a bad imitation of the previous year's infamous War of the Worlds broadcast, the transmission went dead for a moment of dramatic silence. Now, this puts it into a context, I guess, for most listeners. So, these are not original ideas. Right, the War of the World broadcast by Orson Welles had just happened the year before, and it shocked people.
It caused worldwide panic and deaths, even.
Yep, exactly, right. And I think that showed the Nazis how effective a tool radio really was.
What a great medium.
Absolutely. Now, in no time, apparently, radio stations across Greater Europe picked up the story. Now, bear in mind, this is prior to World War II. The BBC broadcast this statement. This is the British Broadcasting Corporation, or company, I think. There have been reports of an attack on a radio station in Gleiwitz, which is just across the Polish border in Silesia, or Schlesien. The German news agency reports that the attack came at about 8 p.m. this evening, when the Poles forced their way into the studio and began broadcasting a statement in Polish. Within quarter of an hour, say reports, the Poles were overpowered by German police who opened fire on them. Several of the Poles were reported killed, but the numbers are not yet known. That's the statement that was issued by the BBC.
What happened the next day?
The next day was September 1, 1939, and it gave the statement and this particular incident gave Hitler the excuse to invade Poland. Okay, that's how World War II began. Now, what actually happened that night? Alfred Helmut Naujoks received the orders from Heinrich Müller, chief of the Gestapo, to put the staged terrorist attack together at the Gleiwitz station. And I will tell you in a while how we know this. At Naujoks' disposal were what the Germans had codenamed canned goods, or in German Konservendosen, which were the centers and criminals kept alive in detention camps until the Gestapo needed a warm, dead body. A little cynical, I guess.
Canned goods, what an expression.
I know. To add cogency to the Gleiwitz attack, Naujoks brought along one such canned good. Franciszek Honiok. Honiok was a German from the Silesian region, and he was also a known Polish sympathizer. Before arriving at the station, the Gestapo had given him a lethal injection. Then they dressed him up like a Polish terrorist, whatever that means, and brought him to the front of the radio station. Naujoks later testified, and I'll tell you where, that the man was unconscious but not dead yet when he was shot full of pistol rounds. So they had given him poison, wasn't quite dead yet, and then they shot him. When the police and press, most importantly, found Honiok's body, they assumed he'd been one of the fictional Polish terrorists that attacked the station. In all, there were 21 fake terror actions along the border that same night, many of them using the canned goods, the Konservendosen, from German prisons, so there would be plenty of bodies in the morning. Evidence of a Polish attack that had been repelled by the German forces in self-defense. The next day, after a long night filled with fake terror, Hitler gave a speech to the German army complete with his synthetic anger. The Polish state has refused the peaceful settlement of relations which I desire and has appealed to arms. Germans in Poland are persecuted with bloody terror and driven from their homes. A series of violations of the frontier, intolerably to a great power, prove that Poland is no longer willing to respect the frontier of the Reich. In order to put an end to this lunacy, I have no other choice than to meet force with force from now on. The German army will fight the battle for the honor and the vital rights of reborn Germany with hard determination. I expect that every soldier, mindful of the great traditions of eternal German soldiery, will remain conscious that he is representative of the National Socialist Greater Germany. Long live our people and our Reich. Now, sorry, I had to say.
Wow, you were channeling.
I was channeling. And I recall listening to it in history class, in fact, and in one of the statements he made, as of 4 o'clock this morning, we are shooting back. That phrase is burned into my mind. We are shooting back. Well, what are you shooting back at is my question, right? Now, but how do we know all this? How do we know it? Now, if it had not been for the Nuremberg trials in 1945, the real story behind the Gleiwitz attack might never have been uncovered. It was here that the operations leader, the very same Alfred Naujok, actually confessed and signed a written affidavit that this is actually what occurred. Okay, so I do apologize to German listeners. I am German myself, so I can do it, I guess. But yeah, I was channeling Hitler there for a moment, I guess. It is the thing, though, and this is what Hitler said as well, and Goering said it. You can't lie little. You must lie big. The bigger the lie, the more likely people will believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So we have arguably one of the most traumatic events in the 20th century started by a lie. started by a false flag attack. That's how dangerous. That's how dangerous these attacks are. These operations, false flag operations, where the people are taken in to believing a truth, which is in fact one of the greatest lies they were ever told. Okay. So.
I just want to we've got
12
minutes before the top of the hour, but what I wanted to say was just how many people had lost their lives during World War II because of a lie.
Yep.
50. Well, this is the estimates.
Yeah, the official number. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, 50 million to more than 80 million.
Yep.
People lost their lives in World War II. Now that's just not even right. That over a lie. I've seen children fighting in a playground because someone's brother said something to someone else's second half cousin.
Sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
But we talk about this in a schoolyard, and here it is, played out in all reality.
Yep.
Lies lead to death. Death is bad. Wars are bad. But it doesn't stop here, people. It doesn't.
Yeah. Now, Baron, but I want you to just understand the callousness of this particular act. Now, they're talking about canned goods. Now, Konservendosen, if you will, right? That's pretty harsh to these are living human beings, which might be criminals in the eyes of the Nazis. I get that, but they're just used to provide warm bodies when required. That's callous. And make no mistake, nothing has changed. The attitude of the powers that be hasn't changed. In fact, the CIA, NASA as well, and a few other U.S. government organizations were largely built by Nazis, or I should say Germans, that went to America after World War II under something called Operation Paperclip. That might be a show for the future. Mm-hmm. But Operation Paperclip also existed on the other side of the Iron Curtain in the USSR. Of course, they didn't call it Operation Paperclip, they called it something else. But the point is, they brought across a Nazi scientist, Nazi intelligence officers, Nazi soldiers, Nazi specialists and industrialists and technicians and engineers and doctors and so forth in order to take advantage of the immense German learning of the time. And they did. I mean, the Germans were ahead in everything, and unfortunately in medical sciences, and this is a little aside before the break, I guess, the unfortunate thing is that the Germans were very far ahead in medical research because they had no compunction about doing live vivisections on human beings, live experiments without any painkillers. Mengele, Josef Mengele, the angel of Auschwitz, angel of death as it were, who was a dentist by profession, performed horrific experiments on twins specifically, and well, the truth is, I mean, it did push medical sciences forward in Germany, and when the information came, there's a point to my ranting here. When the information came to America, this particular information that had been obtained unethically, let's say, and horribly, in fact, to the human beings involved, the then Surgeon General of the United States said, and I can't remember his name, I do not want to use any of this research. I do not want to use any of this knowledge in order to make our medical system better because it's horrific the way it was obtained. Very shortly thereafter, there was a new Surgeon General that was quite willing to use.
They placed someone who was willing to use that technology, of course.
Someone more compliant, as it were. So this is the reality of what we're dealing here, with. I don't want to go into the next one. Actually, maybe we can quickly do the next one. I want to do it justice though, because this is a very, very important one for the United States. So, but maybe we should just discuss quickly a few other things around this as well before I go on to the next false flag operation, Dave. So it is this knowledge, in fact, that was brought to the United States. And I think also the modus operandi, not that the Americans hadn't done it before, like we have seen certainly in earlier times with the Spanish War, but it was certainly a meeting of minds when the Nazis came across into America, and I think what we've seen over the last, let's call it 60 years maybe, I think what we've seen is a Nazification of the United States of America. You know, after World War II, what the Americans were very busy doing is trying to denazify Germany. You know,
Yeah, because they wanted to show themselves as being polar opposite.
Yeah, so they got rid of all the big wigs. You know, most of them were executed at Nuremberg. But the interesting thing is this, and I've got personal experience with this, and I will tell you this. The interesting thing is the middle management, right? The middle management usually got away with it. The functionaries, you know. So my grandfather was a forester in World War II, and that was a fairly in Silesia, in fact, right? And there was a fairly public position at the time. So you know, he was an employee of the state, and they told him, well, you better join the Nazi party. He said, no, I don't want to. He didn't see himself as a Nazi, and he didn't believe in any of the things they did, so he chose not to. Oddly enough, at the same time, he also looked after a contingent of British POWs to use as labor force in the forest, and apparently treated them too well. And my family got in trouble for that as well. But what happened to him was, because he didn't want to join the Nazi party and march with them and whatever, very soon after, a particular functionary that lived in the town where my grandparents lived had him, not deported, but had him sent to the Eastern Front. Now, if there's any front you want to fight on in any war, it's not going to be the Eastern Front during World War II. And in Breslau, which was in the Eastern Front, my grandfather manned a machine gun and lost his arm, his right arm. It was shot off. Well, not shot off, but they had to take it off eventually. And it was actually Russians who found him and then nursed him back to health. My grandfather was about 6'4", 6'5", very tall, very slim man. And once the Russians had nursed him back to health, they released him to, you know, on his own cognizance to go back home. The war was over. Now, this is toward the end of the war. My grandfather was in his 40s at the time, and that's why it was unusual that he would be sent to the Eastern Front. Anyway, so he survived. The Russians had nursed him back to health, and he weighed something like, I think, 35 or 40 kilos when he came back. It's a 2-meter man, virtually a skeleton.
Wow.
Now, the interesting point I'm trying to make is that the man, the functionary, the Nazi party official that had organized for my grandfather to be sent to the Eastern Front was now a thriving communist. Okay? He had changed colors so quickly it would make your head spin. Now, here's middle management. All the big wigs, you know, the Gauleiter, or what you would call the governors for that particular district, they had all been, you know, executed or whatever, but middle management remained. My grandfather was so incensed that he tried to shoot him. My grandmother actually managed to stop that, so they, you know, didn't end up in Siberia for that. That's another uncle of mine that went to Siberia. So I want to just show you that these kinds of people survive. These are the kinds of people that will run the middle management positions. They run the programs without compunction. And that's what happened to the United States as well. All the middle management, all the engineers, all the scientists, they all went to the United States and Russia. And in the United States, they started the CIA. They transformed the OSS, which was the CIA prior to its inception.
Yep.
As well as NASA, then Secret
Werner von
Service.
Braun.
Yeah, Werner von Braun, yeah, 100%. Teller as well. So you have been infiltrated. I don't think Germany lost World War II. I think they just pulled up stumps and camping
relocated
to Washington. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you've seen the movie. What was it called? Help me out, Dave. It's a Peter Sellers movie. It's fabulous. Where he
yes, I have. But
Nazi scientist, right?
Yeah.
And he sits in a wheelchair, and I can't for the life of me. But the subtitle was "How We Stopped Being Afraid of the Bomb." Is the subtitle? Dr. Strangelove.
That's right.
Dr. Strangelove, and Peter Sellers plays a Nazi scientist, and you know he's not actually making any of this up. This is exactly what happened. The American government and the American Advisory Committee were overrun with Germans at the time. So it's really it is really hilarious. I'm sorry, you know, millions of lives were lost to defeat the Nazis, and all we did really was transplant them into a much more powerful nation, and that's where they are today. Okay?
It took the war machine, dismantled it into a technology machine.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all it did.
Yep. Absolutely.
You don't have there's no argument there, right?
No, exactly. In fact, in the chat room, Monkey 8326, you're quite right. George Bush Sr. was in fact the head of the CIA before he went to the White House as advisor, and then later on as the vice president, and now, well, obviously as ex-president, and his son went in there, and his son's sons. and not only that, but Prescott Bush, the grandfather of President Bush Jr. and the father of senior President Bush, worked for the Harriman brothers out of New York, funding and supporting a lot of the Nazis prior to World War II and even during World War II. Read up on it if you're on Harriman brothers, okay? And Prescott Bush was one of the guys working for them. I mean, all this money comes from somewhere. All this influence comes from somewhere, okay? It is certainly not. None of this is coincidence. Today's politics are intimately linked with the politics of the past, and you can't escape that unless you educate yourself. You understand who you're voting for, and maybe it's time to get someone in there that's independent. I'm talking, to Australians as well as Americans, and in fact anyone that has political ambitions. If you are a man or woman of integrity, please stand for office. Please make yourself.
Good luck.
Right? Well, you never know. I still have faith, Dave. I still have faith.
I threw mine out the window when I was driving down the freeway. Don't find me for littering. It wasn't really something that was physical. Do you know what? I'd like to just direct everyone's attention during the top of the hour break. Open up a new browser tab and go to shinysideout.net and have a little look around. You might like something.
Yeah, and also before we hit the station break, do remember this is a listener-funded radio station. This is a listener-funded radio program. Neither Dave nor I make a cent for this, and we don't really want to either, to be honest with you. But certainly we need money to keep the station running. Nighthawk doesn't do it on a prayer. He needs cash to run the servers, to pay for the network connections. All that costs money. If you like the content of this and all the other wonderful shows, like Solaris is just before us, she's got a great show. Do donate and go to Freedom Slips and donate some cash. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you all on the other side of the break. See you guys. Hold on tight.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
The moment you realize you're caught in a dream, the adventure begins. Put your seat backs and tray tables in the upright position as we take a trip in the very fabric of reality. Join me, Andrew Bartzis, for Adventures into Reality, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 10 a.m. to 12 noon at Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
I'm hearing banging. He's trying to get in. He's getting close to the door. I'm going to go ahead and get the gun out. It's a shotgun. It's large.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first. Those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call.
Be here Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. Eastern Time. With Clayton Douglas, the Free American, right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Don't miss each and every show. It should be a fantastic adventure into ideas of freedom and liberty. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. If you plan to call in and speak with one of our hosts, please turn down your radio and separate yourself from any background noise and wait for the area code to be called on before you speak. And don't forget, Revolution Radio freedomslips.com is listener supported. So stop by the homepage, freedomslips.com, visit the site support area to help support the host you're listening to's airtime. Thank you. Revolution Radio freedomslips.com, where the truth never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
You're back with Dave and Mickey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com. This is, as you've heard Nighthawk say in the promo, listener-funded radio. If you like what you hear, please go to freedomslips.com and push the donate button. Your donation is greatly appreciated and helps run this station. We are halfway through show number 70, as we both believe it is.
I think it is 70.
And we are talking about false flags, or black flags. That's the origin from the naval vessels having to falsely say their engines are out by flags and luring the enemy in, and then full barrage when they get close enough. It used to be a cunning trick. So I would like to say that I would also like to let Nighthawk know I've changed my avatar just for you, brother. So, Mickey, how's this false flag evidence coming up from everywhere? Everywhere.
Oh, look, absolutely. And in fact, most recently, I think we've got WikiLeaks to thank for the excuse me, for the very latest exposure. But the reason I just laughed, and I have to say this, Dave, because otherwise it makes no sense. You said cunning trick. Did you say?
Yes, yes. I've got a cunning plan, my lord.
Yeah, that's it. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Blackadder, which is a classic. And there's a character called Baldric, and he's a peasant servant to the indomitable Blackadder, and he always has a cunning plan. It always goes horribly wrong. Sorry, it just you had to be there, I guess.
No, it's really funny, and I like Blackadder asked Baldric once. He says, "Baldric, what do you dream of?" He goes, "Oh, a turnip." And he goes, "Well, what would you dream of if you had, £1 million?" He said, a really big turnip in the country. It's hilarious. We love the show. It's by the way, false flags are plenty. Show always scapegoat. Now, and this is a word that Mackie used in the first half of the show, and that was scapegoat. Look it up. This is where you give some poor patsy the the duty of being the owner of whatever crime it is you've set up. That's the target. Mm-hmm. Sorry, the target is the people. I suppose the patsy is the scapegoat. I think it's something else. Remember, goats used to eat. They eat lots of stuff. You had a goat on your property and washing on the clothesline, it'll eat it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
If it can get anywhere near it. So the scapegoat is, if you'd, and this is what I think my grandmother told me, they were running and playing, and they got their mum's clothes dirty, it fell in the mud, and they'd trodden on it, and so they burned it. And they said the goat had eaten it. That's a true story. True story. Scapegoat.
Oh, well, that's very interesting, Dave. Thank you for that. I mean, it makes sense now, right? Blame the goat.
Mm-hmm. The goat did it.
How do you feel being a goat, Mr. Oswald? Oh, I'm the goat. That's okay.
We have an on-the-spot reporter with a goat right now.
Interestingly enough, on that, we've got someone in the chat room called Sirhan. I don't know if that's in poor taste or in homage to our show, but welcome aboard, Sirhan. So, another patsy, I believe, to some extent.
Oh, that's funny. Look, I'd like to say, just before we keep going, I'd like to say hello to everyone in the chat room, even unauthorized and Stingray. There's a whole bunch of people in here. You know what? If you're on YouTube, you are missing out. The show's a lot of fun, especially in the chat. We type in the chat while we're talking as well, and we answer questions and things like that. So if you are listening to this on YouTube, in the future, we're talking to you from the past, jump into the chat room on freedomslips.com, and there's an array, a bevy. I like one of my favourite words, a bevy of great shows, great content. Get over here and listen to it. Become part of it. That's how I started. I was a long-time listener, first-time caller. There's my Simpsons quote for the day.
Lovely. And look, Dave was right. The reason I'm here is because Dave was here. If Dave hadn't been here, I wouldn't be here. So thank you, Dave. Appreciate
no dramas, Mickey. You know what? You're a powerhouse.
Powerhouse. Yeah, sure. If you saw me, you wouldn't think that. Now.
And if you missed out during the last hour, Mickey was channeling Hitler awesomely in a replica speech that he had actually made. Not Mickey made, but Hitler had made.
Yes.
So what do we got now? This is we've got Pearl Harbor. That's the next topic, isn't it?
Correct, sir, correct. And the reason we didn't want to discuss it with you guys before the break, because I don't think we could have done it justice. Now, I know this is sensitive, and I know there's still veterans of World War II alive today. This does not diminish your contribution in that war, because I do believe that good things came out of it. Not too many, but certainly, liberation of the people in the concentration camps and so forth. That was a great thing, and it had to be done. Now, however,
without America's contribution to the war effort, it really would not have gone well for the rest.
Oh no, absolutely.
It was only with America's help during World War II that the Allies were able to gain victory. So we thank everyone there. And I lost family members, and my grandfather was in 2 wars. My uncle was in one of them, and is in the Second World War as well. So, you know what? Yeah, we're not belittling you. We're not putting you down. We respect everyone that takes part, whether you make it through or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And heads go off in salutation to all those that lost their lives. Mm-hmm. And because they did believe they were defending freedom, and to some extent they were. And what happened afterwards, something that Eisenhower warned us about, nobody could have stopped.
The military-industrial complex.
Yeah, that's right. So it is in that spirit, and hoping to avoid something like this in the future, is that we discuss Pearl Harbor. Now, the story goes that on December 7, 1941, which was a Sunday morning, the Japanese launched a sneak attack at Pearl Harbor that decimated the U.S. Pacific Fleet. and force the United States to enter World War II. That's the official story, and essentially that's what happened. However, there was no sneak attack. The Pacific Fleet was not destroyed or decimated. And furthermore, the United States, and when I say United States, I'm talking about the power elite, took great pains to bring about the Japanese assault. Now, why would I say that? On January 27, 1941, Joseph C. Grew, the U.S. ambassador to Japan, wired Washington that he'd learned of the surprise attack Japan was preparing for Pearl Harbor. January 27. It happened December 7 of the same year. On September 24 of the same year, a dispatch from Japanese naval intelligence to Japan's consul general in Honolulu was deciphered. And that transmission was a request for a grid of exact locations of ships in Pearl Harbor. Surprisingly, Washington chose not to share this information with the officers at Pearl Harbor. Then, on November 26, the main body of the Japanese strike force, consisting of 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, 8 tankers, 23 fleet submarines, and 5 midget submarines, departed Japan for Hawaii. Despite the myth that the strike force maintained strict radio silence, U.S. naval intelligence intercepted and translated many dispatches. Also, there was no shortage of dispatches. Tokyo sent over 1,000 transmissions to the attack fleet before it reached Hawaii. Now, many ships were damaged at Pearl Harbor, correct, but they were all old and slow, all of them. The main targets of Japanese attack were the Pacific Fleet's aircraft carriers, but Roosevelt made sure these were safe from the attack. In November, at about the same time as the Japanese attack fleet left Japan, Roosevelt sent the Lexington and Enterprise out to sea. Meanwhile, the Saratoga was in San Diego. These are the aircraft carriers, guys.
Yep.
Because Japan had signed a mutual defense pact with Germany and Italy, Roosevelt knew war with Japan was a legitimate backdoor to joining the war in Europe. Because the Germans hadn't declared war on America, and it was difficult because the people were actually against joining the war. Okay, the American people did not want a part of World War II at that point. So because the Germans had failed to declare war on America, even though there were some provocations, you could call them if you wanted to, he decided Japan was a much easier route to go. On October 7, 1940, which is a year prior to the attack, one of Roosevelt's military advisors, Lieutenant Commander Arthur McCollum, wrote a memo detailing an 8-step plan that would provoke Japan into attacking the United States. Over the next year, Roosevelt implemented all 8 of the recommended actions. In the summer of 1941, the US joined England in an oil embargo against Japan. Japan needed oil for its war with China and had no remaining option but to invade the East Indies and Southeast Asia to get new resources. Now, it was part of the Manchurian incident as well, if you recall, from just a little while ago. And that required getting rid of the U.S. Pacific Fleet first. They can't just march into the East Indies and Southeast Asia. They had to get rid of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Now, the East Indies are now what you would call Indonesia, Vietnam, and so forth. Although Roosevelt may have had got more than he bargained for, he clearly let the attack on Pearl Harbor happen, and even helped Japan by making sure their attack was a surprise. He did this by withholding information from Pearl Harbor's commanders, and even by ensuring the attack force wasn't accidentally discovered by commercial shipping traffic. As Rear Admiral Richmond K. Turner stated in 1941, we were prepared to divert traffic when we believed war was imminent. We sent traffic down via the Torres Strait, so that the track of the Japanese task force would be clear of any traffic.
Wow.
Okay, so what does this mean? It means that these people, and I'm not saying it was a good thing or a bad thing, what I'm saying is it was a deception of the American people. It was a deception that cost a lot of lives. People were killed in Pearl Harbor, and it was an extreme measure to make the United States enter a war they didn't want to enter. Okay, I'm not saying that they shouldn't enter it or wouldn't enter it, or, all I'm saying is the way they entered it was by deception and by, allowing an attack to happen, which is, allowing your enemy to strike, which is just as good as you striking yourself. That's why it's still being discussed under the false flag here.
If you if you know that you'd get into trouble or you wouldn't have favour, you've probably heard this same expression. Go on, just hit me. Just me once. Go on. Just do it.
Yeah.
It means that you've got, unequivocal right to retaliate with all your guns blazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this reeks of. This really does.
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly. I mean, it is goading. It is goading Japan into attacking because if Japan runs out of resources, well, they have to secure them somehow. Germany had the same problem. Germany is resource poor. There's a lot of coal, but Germany has zero oil, and that's why it was racing to both Central Asia and to the Middle East, unsuccessfully, as it were. And luckily, I guess for us, otherwise we'd be living in a very totalitarian state right now. Not that we're not. I guess at the end of the day, the outcome is sort of the same. Now, there's also something a little closer to home. Closer to our time, when we are moving into more recent false flag attacks. This is a very interesting one, and again, we will get a lot of hate for this, Dave. But we are the shiny side out, and we bring the truth no matter where it leads us.
Mm-hmm.
In July 1954, an Israeli terrorist cell was activated inside Egypt. The ensuing attacks, cleverly designed to look like the work of Arabs, blasted and torched American and British targets. First, the Israeli terrorists firebombed the Alexandria post office. Then they firebombed the U.S. Information Agency libraries, one in Alexandria and one in Cairo. Then they firebombed a British-owned Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer movie theater, a railway terminal, a central post office, and a couple more theaters. Now, why? Why? And this is something that I studied at length at university. I do have a political sciences degree, and I majored in Middle Eastern politics, believe it or not. In the early 1950s, the United States was making fast friends with Egypt. Now, we are going into the Cold War, guys. This is going into the Cold War. And Egypt is being courted by both the USSR and the USA because at that time, it was the most powerful nation in the Middle East. A big standing army, a massive airstrike capability, and also a relatively stable government. And they were taking, so the United States were taking advantage of the new pan-Arab Egyptian government of Gamal Abdel Nasser. So you might have heard of Nasser and his dream of unifying the Arab world. And Israel, in fact, wasn't favored by the US at all. Israel was quite a weak nation, which had yet to prove its mettle and get US support. So at that time, it was the US trying to make friends with Egypt. Now, the warming relationship between the US and Egypt caused a very insecure feeling in Israel. And they certainly felt threatened, which is understandable, because all the Arab nations had vowed to destroy and wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So again, I'm not questioning motivations here. Dave and I are simply looking at historical facts that brought about false flag attacks. We're not talking about motivations, whether or not they're justified or not. Nasser also had plans to nationalize the Suez Canal, which had been controlled by the British for decades. I don't know if you remember the Suez Crisis. This is part of it. Egypt had been known to blockade Israeli shipping through the canal, and Israel feared Nasser would make the blockade permanent. After US President Eisenhower began encouraging the British to leave the Suez Canal on behalf of the Egyptians, Israel started looking for a way to make the British stay, and a way to remain best buddies with America. Well, or to become best buddies, because they weren't. And what better way to treat your best friend than to stab them in the back and tell them one of your other friends did it. Right? That's like clearly a black flag attack. Now, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding prime minister, also at the time before he was before it was Israel, he was part of a terrorist organization himself that bombed British targets in Palestine. So the Arabs and the Jews, as it were at the time, they're not really Israelis yet, but certain Jewish settlers that had come across from Europe and from the States, were making war on each other to gain dominance in Palestine. In fact, and get the British out, which the British eventually did. They left and left Palestine to the Israelis, and they soon turned it into Israel. In fact, so anyway, so David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding prime minister, thought that Egyptian terrorist attacks against Americans would be a perfect way to cool the growing US-Egypt relationship. Of course, since there were no Egyptians planning attacks against Americans, Ben-Gurion's protégés did the next best thing. They recruited Israeli agents to pretend to be Egyptian terrorists. The top secret Israeli terrorist cell, Unit 131, had existed since 1948. Okay? So, when Unit 131 member Philip Nathanson was identified as one of the terrorists who had been blowing up American and British buildings, the plot began to unravel. Nathanson was interrogated by Egypt's military intelligence and confessed the whole plot, which led to more arrests and more confessions. When the Israeli spies were given a public trial, public, not hidden, all the details of the terrorist training in Israel came to light. Former Israeli Prime Minister at that time, Ben-Gurion, and Israel's Amman chief, Binyamin Gibli, tried to frame their own defense minister Pinhas Lavon. So they tried to frame him and give him all the fault, all the guilt for that particular thing. They even offered forged documents as proof. The frame-up worked for a while, so much so that in fact the incident is still known today as the Lavon affair. Lavon resigned, and Ben-Gurion came out of political retirement to replace him as Israel's defense minister. However, the truth prevailed. In 1960, a review of the inquiry discovered the fake documents, as well as perjury by Seidenberg. Seidenberg was one of the chief witnesses for the Israelis. A committee of 7 cabinet members cleared Lavon. Although Ben-Gurion never admitted fault, he did resign his post as defense minister. He was never prosecuted. Bear in mind that, okay? He wasn't. So this is all come out. None of this is conspiracy. None of this is made up. But Dave and I, we didn't make this up. You can follow our sources and look it up for yourselves. Just another example of fine false flag attack, which actually killed a number of people. So it's very difficult for people to sit on high horses and cast the first stone when you throw history back in their face, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with that. Let's Mackie, to talk about Operation Northwoods.
That's an amazing one, mate. This in fact is the handbook of 9/11 as far as I'm concerned.
That's what I read when I was looking through this too.
Right now,
yeah,
I became aware of Operation Northwoods some years ago. In fact, I think Jim Marrs was the first one that meant that I could. I think one of his books mentioned it, and that was the first time I was made aware of it. And this is now probably 10, 15 years ago.
Now, we interviewed Jim. And
yes.
We had a limited time frame with him.
Yes.
And he wasn't in the best of health, and we really wanted to have been able to get out more of this, but it just sadly didn't happen in time frame.
Yes. And he was look, my head goes off to you, Jim. You're an inspiration. Okay, now what did happen in Operation Northwoods? In 1962, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff unanimously proposed state-sponsored acts of terrorism on American soil against American citizens. I'm going to say this again. The Joint Chiefs of Staff unanimously proposed state-sponsored acts of terrorism on American soil against American citizens. The head of every branch of the U.S. Armed Forces gave written approval to sink U.S. ships, shoot down hijacked American planes, and gun down and bomb civilians on the streets of Washington, D.C. and Miami. Now, why? The idea was to blame the self-inflicted terrorism on Cuba's leader, Fidel Castro. So the American public would beg and scream for the Marines to storm Havana, depose Castro, and take Cuba. The public learned about Operation Northwoods 35 years later, when the top-secret document was declassified by the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board. Okay, now, 35
Here's the
years.
detail.
So my guess is, before we go further here, is that in another 25 years, we will learn about 9/11. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Now, among other things, and this is where you guys have to listen, among other things, Operation Northwoods proposed the following. Faking the crash of an American passenger plane. The disaster was to be accomplished by faking a commercial flight from the US to Jamaica and having the plane boarded at a public airport by CIA agents disguised as college students going on vacation. Now, this is where it gets interesting. An empty, remote-controlled plane would follow the commercial flight as it left Florida. The commercial flight's pilot would radio for help, mention that they had been attacked by a Cuban fighter, and then land in secret at the Eglin Air Force Base. The empty remote-controlled plane would then be blown out of the sky, and the public would be told all the poor college students aboard were killed. Right. Next, using a possible NASA disaster, in this instance John Glenn's death, as a pretext to launch the war. The plan called for manufacturing various pieces of evidence which would prove electronic interference on the part of the Cubans if something went wrong with NASA's third manned space launch. Next, blowing up buildings. That sounds familiar. In Washington and Miami, Cuban agents, undercover CIA agents of course, would be arrested and they would confess to the bombings. In addition, false documents proving Castro's involvement in attacks would be found and given to the press. Next, attacking an American military base in Guantanamo with CIA recruits posing as Cuban mercenaries. This involved blowing up the ammunition depot and would obviously result in material damages and many dead American troops. As a last resort, the plan even mentioned bribing one of Castro's commanders to initiate the Guantanamo attack. That deserves repeating. The Pentagon considered using US tax dollars to bribe another country's military to attack US troops in order to instigate a full-scale war. Okay? Now, this is not made up, guys. Operation Northwoods was only one of several plans under the umbrella of Operation Mongoose. Look it up. Research it, please. Shortly after the Joint Chiefs of Staff signed and presented the plan in March 1962, President Kennedy, still smarting from the Bay of Pigs fiasco, like Bay of Pigs really went south, didn't really go well, declared that he would never authorize a military invasion of Cuba. In September, Kennedy denied the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Lyman Lemnitzer, a second term as the nation's highest-ranking military officer. And by the winter of 1963, Kennedy was dead, killed, apparently, by a Cuban sympathizer, Oswald, in the streets of an American city. Of course, none of this is related at all. Pure coincidence, right? That's what they are. Coincidenting. It's a coinky-dinky, Dave. Oh.
So just that the fact that the government was willing to do all of those things, crash planes, falsify evidence, what else? Passenger plane, people. Blow up buildings. Listen.
Yeah.
Very important. At the end of this, I want to see some people in the chat room posting what they think, because and you can email both Meki and I via our website. Go there and I want to hear your comments.
Yeah.
This is one that's close to me as well, because this was for the first one that I learnt about. So Meki, take this, and it's in my list, but you're doing a great job. Let's just keep rolling.
Let's roll, dude. Yeah, look, and I want to make this is immediate, guys, and this is probably the most dangerous or explosive topic Dave and I have discussed, because it is happening right now. So bear with us. Okay, August 2, 1964. 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats attack a U.S. destroyer, the USS Maddox. The boats reportedly fired torpedoes at the U.S. ship in international waters in the Gulf of Tonkin. Which is about 30 miles off the Vietnamese coast. On August 4, the U.S. Navy reported another unprovoked attack on the USS Maddox and the USS Turner Joy. Within hours, okay, does that remind you of anything? 9/11, within hours. President Lyndon B. Johnson ordered a retaliatory strike. As the basis for the North Vietnamese torpedo boats were bombed, Johnson went on TV and told America, "Repeated acts of violence against the armed forces of the United States must be met not only with alert defense, but with a positive reply. That reply is being given as I speak tonight." Now, I have no idea what he sounds like, so I'm sure I didn't do a good job imitating him. Right? The next day, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, that name should ring a bell, assured Capitol Hill, which is Washington, that the Maddox had only been carrying out a routine mission of the type we carry out all over the world at all times. McNamara said that the 2 boats were in no way involved with recent South Vietnamese boats raids against North Vietnamese targets. Now, bear in mind, this is before the United States is involved in the Vietnamese War, okay? This is before the entry. Now, At Johnson's request, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. The resolution pre-approved any military actions Johnson would take. It gave Johnson a free ticket to wage war in Vietnam as long as
large as the president wanted.
Yeah, sorry, as large as the president wanted. Okay? That was a free ticket, guys. You no longer need any congressional oversight or approval. By 1969, over 500,000 U.S. troops were fighting in Indochina, which is Vietnam, or Southeast Asia. Despite McNamara's testimony to the contrary, the USS Maddox had been providing intelligence support to South Vietnamese boats carrying out raids against North Vietnam. McNamara also testified that there was unequivocal proof of an unprovoked second attack against the USS Maddox. In fact, that second attack never occurred at all. Okay, so bear in mind, the US was helping the South Vietnamese before they had actually entered the war. Okay? So it was not necessarily an unprovoked attack. And again, I'm not questioning the rightness or the justification of any of these acts. I'm just pointing out the deceptive nature of how things are being done. At the time of the second incident, the two US destroyers misinterpreted radar and radio signals as attacks by the North Vietnamese Navy. Now, this is funny. It is now known that no North Vietnamese boats were in the area, so for 2 hours, the two US destroyers blasted away at non-existent radar targets and vigorously maneuvered to avoid phantom North Vietnamese ships. I'm sorry. It's comical. This is farcical. You know, even though the second attack only involved two US ships defending themselves against a non-existing enemy, the President and Secretary of Defense used it to coerce Congress and the American people to start a war they neither wanted nor needed.
I wonder how many people were lost in friendly fire.
Oh, my! That's exactly right. Now, after the Vietnam turned into a disaster, a quagmire as it were, Congress decided to put limits on the President's authority to unilaterally wage war. Therefore, on November 7, 1973, Congress overturned President Nixon's veto and passed the War Powers Resolution. The resolution requires the President to consult with Congress before making any decisions that engage the U.S. military in hostilities. It is still in effect to this day. Well, more or less.
That's funny because the same thing was asked of Congress after 9/11.
Correct.
So doesn't that take us to 9/11?
Thank you for the segue. Okay, now this is very, very difficult, guys. This is very difficult territory. And if you haven't got the background, if you are not familiar with the research that has been done, it might anger you. And I understand that. I do urge you, though, to look at this objectively, and I do urge you to look at it independently. Look at the evidence as it presents itself. No, like many buildings built in the 1970s, the Twin Towers were constructed with vast amounts of asbestos, which is cancer-causing, as we know now. The cost of removing the Twin Towers asbestos would have been a year's worth of revenue for the buildings, okay, and possibly as much as the value of the buildings themselves. The cost to disassemble the Twin Towers floor by floor would have run into the double-digit billions. Okay, so this is an unhealthy building, if you will. Asbestos will kill you in the long run. In addition, the Port Authority was prohibited from demolishing the towers because the resulting asbestos dust would cover the entire city, which it did when they collapsed, resulting in many cancers with a confirmed link to the World Trade Center dust. Despite its questionable status, in January of 2001, Larry Silverstein made a $3.2 billion bid for the World Trade Center. On July 24, the Port Authority accepted the offer. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Silverstein then took out an insurance policy that, understandably, of course, covered terrorist attacks, which happened 7 weeks later. Up to this point, to date, Silverstein has been awarded almost $5 billion from 9 different insurance companies. Now, what was a potential asbestos nightmare, turned into an $1.8 billion profit within 7 weeks.
Awesome.
I don't know the last time I made $1.8 billion in 7 weeks. Dave, do you?
No, not to date.
Not to date. Okay, now Another interesting tidbit, which we've mentioned before.
I like this one.
Donald Rumsfeld said about the Pentagon on the morning of September 10, 2001. September 10, 2001. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in
How big was that?
transactions. $2.3 trillion.
Mhm.
That is $2,300 billion. Now, we cannot track them. Now, obviously, the following morning, no one any longer talked about the $2.3 trillion. Now, as a reward for losing $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America, taxpayers patriotically forked over another $370 billion and counting. Right? It's not just Iraq now, to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. And true to form, apparently the Pentagon lost $9 billion of that money too. This is not a laughing matter, but I can't help myself, right?
Do you know, if you're an accountant for a business and you said, I'm sorry, we can't find $2.3 trillion in our transactions, I don't think you'd be the accountant any longer.
No, you'd be hanged for treason.
In all honesty, it's probably just code for them to say this is how much we spent in black projects.
Look,
deep black secret projects.
But this money, the $2,000 billion, $2,000 billion. Just imagine if it truly is in black projects, right? Even half. Let's call it 1,000 billion, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is incompetence. Imagine the stuff that could be purchased. Imagine the research they could have done.
You could make anything, I swear. You could just make time travel or jump rooms. You could make anti-gravity and, you could make things that looked remarkably similar to what science fiction depicts as flying saucers. Oh, wait a minute. It's all real.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite astonishing. I mean, and it doesn't even end there. There's more, guys.
Mm-hmm.
There's more. But wait, there's more. I feel like I should sell you some steak knives. Now, 8 days after the attacks, 8 days,
Mm-hmm.
8 days, 8 days. And I don't know if you've ever typed anything. I don't know if you've written anything. The 342-page Patriot Act was given to Congress.
8 days?
8 days.
342 pages.
342 pages. Right? Now, that's astonishing in itself. However,
That was sitting in a drawer, right?
Dude, exactly. But the astonishing thing is this. Cast your mind back. I don't know if you remember this. That same week, letters laced with anthrax from a U.S. military lab entered the mail.
Mm-hmm.
Subsequently, while congressional offices were evacuated, examined, cleaned, and nasal cavities were swabbed, the Patriot Act remained largely unread. Then, with little debate, the Patriot Act became law, giving the Bush administration unprecedented power to access people's medical records, tax records, information about the books they bought or borrowed, and the power to conduct secret residential searches without notifying owners that their homes had been searched. No pattern.
I.e. waiting for you to go down the shops, and when you do, they can go in your house without a warrant.
Bingo.
And do searches on your private property. Private property. Since then, we've also seen that mobile phones are now on request to be unlocked because they're your diary. They consider a diary with handwriting in it, so that they've got access to that at a police stop. Police doing a traffic stop have the ability to request that you unlock your phone to ensure that you weren't texting while you were driving. Well, that's what they say. I'd like to also point out at this point, because we are talking about 9/11, did you know that 3 days after 9/11, reported, this is General Wesley Clark, as we all know, famous videos on YouTube, just want to bring it all together into one place. 3 days after 9/11 was reported that the US government said, this is what Wesley Clark is reporting, we've got a good military and we can take down governments. Mm-hmm. And this plan that this is the General Wesley Clark, I repeat this, at the White House, was shown a plan to invade 7 countries in 5 years. And those countries are, in order, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finally Iran. Right, Kat? we think about an invasion force, but he's talking about a good military and we can take down governments. Tell me, which ones of those have now had real elections with, well, maybe patsies or scapegoats put in place, or people have been placed in power with American favoritism?
All of them except Iran, my friend.
Exactly. Now, that is something interesting, and if you don't listen to that General Wesley Clark and what he brought out, I think you got your head in the sand. Uh-huh. But let's keep going, because this is powerful.
No, it is powerful. Now, let's go. In early 2001, executives from Shell, BP, and Exxon met with Dick Cheney's Energy Task Force while it was developing its new national energy policy. Later, the companies freely admitted interest in profiting from Iraq's oil fields, even before the US invaded Iraq. What's happening now? A new Iraq hydrocarbon law, which was passed, I think, in 2007, March 2007, opened the door for international investors, which were led by BP.
Hang on, wait a minute. Can I guess?
Go on, see.
BP, Exxon, and Shell.
Bingo!
Hey!
And they are now enabled to siphon off 75% of Iraqi oil wealth for the next 30 years.
No.
Oh, yes. Now, there's other stuff here as well, which is interesting. According to the statements by Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who was a Bronze Star recipient with a 22 years of experience in intelligence operations, a classified intelligence program codenamed Able Danger had uncovered 2 of the 3 9/11 terrorist cells a year before the attacks and had identified 4 of the hijackers. Schaefer alerted the FBI in September of 2000, 1 year. But the meetings he tried to set up with bureau officials were repeatedly blocked by military lawyers. Right. And there are other things as well. The US also received dozens of detailed warnings, names, locations, dates, from the intelligence agencies of Indonesia, Great Britain, Germany, Italy, Egypt, Jordan, India, Argentina, Morocco, Russia, Israel, France, and even the Taliban. It would seem that the entire world was onto the bungling Saudi hijackers and somewhat perplexed that the US wasn't taking preventative actions. But in each case, the US, as if by design, chose not to investigate. Instead, this is what Condoleezza Rice said on May 16, 2002. May 16, 2002. I don't think anybody could have predicted that these people would take an airplane and slam it into the World Trade Center, take another one and slam it into the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
Hello? I'm sorry, I actually remember that interview, okay? I do remember it.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember it. Now, there were other things as well, such as the multiple Air Force war games and drills that were in progress on the morning of 9/11.
The same morning.
The same morning.
And what was the topic of those drills?
Oh, okay. Now, Operation Northern Vigilance ensured that many jet fighters that would have normally been patrolling the East Coast were flying over Alaska and northern Canada in a drill that simulated a Russian air attack, complete with false radar blips. Remarkably, Operation Vigilant Guardian simulated hijacked planes in the in the northeastern sector, exactly where this happened, while real hijackers were in the same airspace. This drill had NORAD thinking, as well as the Air Force, that they were reacting to false blips on the FAA radar screen. Okay, now some of these blips corresponded to real military aircraft in the air posing as hijacked aircraft. That's why when NORAD's airborne control officer, Lieutenant Colonel Dwayne Deskins, heard Boston claim it had a hijacked airliner, his first words were this: "It must be part of the exercise."
Mm-hmm.
Too many coincidences. Now, there's only one more thing I want to share with you, and this is something that Hermann Goering, and actually two things. Sorry. Hermann Goering, again, one of Hitler's main men, said this: "Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor in Germany. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along. Whether it is a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, The people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is to tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in any country.
That guy was a genius.
Genius. And this is what Adolf Hitler said in Mein Kampf, which is My Fight, his book, and it's still, forbidden in some countries. In the size of the lie, there is always contained a certain factor of credibility, since the great masses of the people will more easily fall victim to a great lie than to a small one.
Mm-hmm.
And with that thought, I'd like to leave you. Next time, I want to share some reasons with you why any of this matters. But Dave has got something special for us.
Oh, yes. Well, firstly, I'd like to say, please stay tuned after Shiny Side Out for Helena Phoenix and Time to Shine.
She's great.
Got to bring this Aussie content in, and aren't we doing great, everyone? Hey, I also wanted to say that part of this, and we talked about this a bit earlier on, we know what false flags are, but they don't just come in the they don't stare us in the face all the time. And some of these are as simple as just wanting to get past gun control, for instance. So in Australia, we saw the Port Arthur massacre, and it was touted by the government, like we've spoken about before, as being a tremendous success story. We had the horrible instance of a massacre with a person who could not have made those one-shot middle head death shots at close range in a tight environment, by military experts saying that it's impossible. However, the rolling from the morbid fascination of people dying to tabling a bill which was to remove our right to own guns, have a gun buyback program, tone down the kind of weapon that you can have, all of those things was touted by the government after the success of it as being it was too easy. We did this, we've done it now, it's great, we've now got less guns owned by the, as Meki put it before, the honest people, or the criminals still have guns. However, global gun ownership in the same period fell equilaterally across the planet. We were suddenly taken by Sony Walkmans, and our life had changed immeasurably with technology in a different way, and we just stepped sideways for a moment. So it wasn't the success, it was the low gun ownership wasn't based on the gun buyback program, which they bought the guns back from you and they melted them down apparently rather than selling them to someone else, which I really believe they did. This same thing has been happening everywhere else. Have a listen to this. You tell me if these things are, if they don't raise your propaganda levels, yeah? Listen to this. So you've got Sandy Hook shooting. We've all seen that. The Newtown shooting. We've got the Batman shooting. These are all false flag situations. We've got the Boston Marathon bombing. Now experts are saying that it doesn't look like it was constructed by those people. And we've seen that the guy was naked, put into a police vehicle, and then suddenly photos emerged of him being, slashed and torn apart. And what? None of that made any sense. These things can be used for anything. You can use a false flag to go to the shops. Oh, honey, I've run out of milk. However, you haven't. You've just tipped it all down the sink. There might, in fact, still be milk there. Or, as some people trying to exit a relationship would say, I'd just like to go down the street for a packet of cigarettes and never come back again. That's really a false flag. I've run out of cigarettes. Oh, but he doesn't smoke. But look, for what do we stare at in the future for us? And this is coming directly from Dr. Carol Rosen. She worked for Fairchild in the 70s and was working next to in NASA for 5 years, I think it was, 4 or 5 years. Werner von Braun. She worked with him And he would always talk about the weaponization of space and all the false flag excuses that were going to be put in place and in the exact order that they've been put in place. And she's now on the circuit talking about this, and I think it's believable. She says, his warning was the next thing that would be a space-based attack, having already achieved these things already. So that was Russia. Russia would be, it was currently the enemy. They've already weaponized space, so we need to do it. Then terrorists, and we've seen that. And then areas of concern. Very important that you don't have those rogue states getting up and doing things. The next one would be asteroids. We're currently in those areas of concern at the moment. And then there's asteroids, of course. And then this is the final card that she said that he repeated over and over again for the 4 years. That there was going to be a fake alien attack, or there was going to be the reason for having space-based weapons was because we were going to be attacked by aliens. And she said that you'd see this ramp up. It would ramp up and get stronger and stronger and faster, and that these time periods we had to base ourselves on were getting smaller and smaller to get these achievements done. I think that the movie Iron Sky, while I always think, yes, it's science fiction, but so much in science fiction is based on what we see and hear around us.
And has become true.
It is. It really is. And Iron Sky is a great one for that. Yeah, sure it's the Nazis on the moon. It's a really funny film, and I love it. I think it's great. It's up there, with Tron, in one of those cult movies that, it was a great thing, but, did many people see it? I don't know. So, at the end of the movie, I did a spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. At the end of the movie, everyone's satellites, they were just, up there for communication satellites, were suddenly manned for some reason, and they all had weapons. And America had the biggest one that even, seemed to assemble itself in space. It looked like the ISS on steroids. It was hilarious. I really liked that. Suddenly all these missiles and weapons are coming out the side, and they had technology beyond our belief. I can't see any reason why any of these things are false that we've talked about tonight. We've brought you the facts. Facts are there. They're plain and simple. If you can't pull out from each one of these things we've talked about so far tonight and join that to the things that we're witnessing in our own lifetime, these took nearly 100 years of time frame we've put in place. It is, right?
Yeah. Well, we started actually 2,000 years ago, but yes.
Yeah, that's right. So the
detail about 100 years. No, you're right. And it's happening right now.
But over that period of time, we've seen these events, but in our own lifetime, in the last 10 years, guys, we've seen the same things. We've had government officials come forward and talk about this thing. We've had, my favourite is the baggage handler of 9/11 saying, why are we pulling all those people off the planes? What about their bags? And in that story there, in the story about the Cubans and putting CIA on, taking everyone off, I loved that they replaced everybody with no one. Turned it into a remote control plane. We've seen the bubble thing on the bottom of that plane that hits the tower.
That's it. It's the remote. This was in the 1960s, guys. The remote control plane.
Yeah. We know they flew a remote control plane into the ground to see what effect it would have. That was a military plane, and moreover, that was a test of remote control because that was done in the 70s. Just put all this stuff together. I have to say, if this was Mythbusters, but it isn't, right? And I'm not Jamie, right?
And I'm not the other guy.
Yeah, whoever the other guy is, yeah. I have to say that this is plausible.
Ooh, is that the music already?
It sure is. You know what, guys? It's a goodbye from me.
And me, bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. See you next week. for another Shiny Side Out.